What's up, pagan people? Drew here, and today I am showing my decks. Now, I don't want this video to be extremely long, so I'm going to quickly go through them. First, there is this Vertigo Tarot. This is sort of a novelty deck for me. I have never read with this deck. I'm not actually going to open it up and look at it. The artwork is very sort of surreal, and it's artwork that was used for the comic book series The Sandman by Neil Gaiman. It is work that was primarily on the covers of individual comic books. It is my absolute favorite comic book series. I own all the graphic novels and several of the individual comics themselves. And so this deck is more just the marrying of two things that I love, tarot and Sandman. It's a gift that was given to me by my husband. Next is Llewellyn, and I keep it in this little bag. This is the back of the Llewellyn deck. And if I'm honest, I never read with this deck. This deck is just beautiful. I absolutely adore the cards in this deck. I can't bear to part with it. But for me, tarot is more of a tool that I use to get in touch with guidance and intuition. And it's not so much about the actual meanings of the cards, because when I try to read a deck like this that's more traditional, I get caught up in what the card is supposed to mean, and my intuition goes right out the door, and I can't remember everything that every card means, and I get frustrated, and it's just not helpful. And so for me, I need decks that are less than traditional so that I'm not so focused on what they mean, and I can actually get into a good intuitive space and give a good reading. So while I don't regularly read with this deck, I don't know that I'll ever get rid of it. I can't bear to part with it. I just adore it. I think it's beautiful. The very first deck I ever owned was a Rider-Waite deck. I have passed it on to my daughter because it's just not useful for me. And I also have the Brian Froud Fairy Oracle, but I don't use it to read either. It is just purely a decorative element in my studio at this point. This, however, is my favorite all-time deck that I use primarily. I have talked about it before in past videos. This, of course, is the Osho Zen Tarot deck, and there is a companion book. I do know what many of these cards mean, but I'm not limited by that. I can read the same card 10 different ways when it comes to this deck. For some reason, it just opens me up fully to my intuition, and I think that the imagery is beautiful. I love the color palette. I love everything about this deck. So this is my Nothingness, my very favorite tarot deck, personally. The one that I work best with. Look at that. Transformation. There's so much going on. I mean, there's a face here. There's so much going on in these cards. And yeah, I just think they're really beautiful. This is my favorite card. First off, I love Osho, but this is the card of self-mastery, and that's where my journey is leading. At least that's my intention. So this is my favorite card in the deck. Of course, this is what the back looks like. Next, we have the Shaman Oracle, a Truth Seeker's Guide, John Matthews and Will Kingham. This is what the back of this deck looks like. Now, this is not a deck that I reach for each and every time I read. I do adore this deck, but my favorite thing to do with this deck is to sort of sit and contemplate the cards and their meanings. And I just think they're really beautiful. I just love them. But I do read with them occasionally, just not as much as some of my other Oracle decks. I have far more Oracle decks than I do tarot cards because, again, I'm able to just tap into my intuition and read freely with Oracle more easily than I am with tarot, personally. Aren't they beautiful? So you have 4 suits. You've got the ancestors, the hunters, the spirit, and the shaman. So yeah, they're just lovely. And the book, it's a really nice book. Beside the depiction of the card, you have this sort of musing as if it's coming from the card, the spirit of the card. So we have the shaman of birth, and it says, I am the shaman of birth. I guide souls into being. I am present from the moment of conception to the moment when the newborn arrives in this world. I help at the birth of many things, including ideas, beliefs, wisdom, and change. I guard and show the way to all who seek this path of new beginnings. Trust in me as you contemplate your future, for I am midwife to the dreams of many. And then it talks about the meaning of the card underneath. And at the very bottom here, it has interpretations. So new life, new directions and ideas, rebirth of dreams, fulfillment, encouraging new approaches to problems, preparing for the moment, and future lifelines. So yeah, I really love that deck. I have the Halloween Oracle by Stacey DeMarco. And I'm sure that many of you, if not all of you, have seen these already. Here's the back. And I really enjoy working with these cards. I can see that some people would maybe think that they might be a little cheesy, but I love them. I think they're beautiful, and I really enjoy the readings that I have done with them. This is my newest deck. I just got it last year. Most of my other decks are at least 8 years old. I bought the vast majority of my decks while working at that metaphysical shop that I used to work at, the witchy shop, Compass Rose. These are the medicine cards by James Sams and David Carson, and I'm going to be honest and tell you that I don't like them at all. Here's the back. I don't like the color palette. I don't like the size. They're very flimsy. I mean, so flimsy. And I don't like the artwork on them at all. I do not use these for Oracle at all. Having said that, I love this book that comes with it. It is a very substantial book. It's hardback and it's beautiful. Within you have all the cards. You have the imagery from the cards and then a sort of poem, if you will, underneath. This one, for instance, Badger, Badger, until you reach your goal, know the inner power that lives in your soul. And it sort of coincides with whatever animal we're looking at. And then the badger is aggressiveness, and it talks all about, you know, that working with that animal, learning that animal medicine, the animal's lessons. And this book is really cool because they've worked with, I think, 4 or more Native American tribes and taken the teachings from those tribes and incorporated them into the book. So for me, this book was 100% worth the purchase of the cards, whether I use those or not. Next, let's talk Doreen Virtue. I have several Doreen Virtue decks. Yes, I am aware that, you know, she's gone all Christian-y and whatever, but to me, that doesn't matter. That wasn't a surprise. I felt like she was kind of Christian-y from the get, so whatever. And I bought the decks because I was drawn to them at the time and liked them. This is the first Oracle deck I ever bought. It's Healing with the Angels, and it is, of course, Doreen Virtue. Here's what the back looks like. I will admit that I am not 100% in love with these cards, the imagery, but honestly, they're very sort of nostalgic, and there's a sentimental quality for me when it comes to these cards. So I love them, and looking at them makes me want to read with them. So I think I'm going to later today. Yeah, I do love them, even though there's this weird continuity problem. Happens a lot with Doreen's decks. I don't like it. There's no real continuity of the cards. The artwork, if you call it that sometimes, is very diverse, and I don't like it. It takes me out of the reading. This book is very flimsy and small, but I like to use these more intuitively, although I will refer to the book. This was probably the second Doreen Virtue deck that I bought, this Ascended Masters deck, and I adore this deck. Love it with every fiber of my being. This is a very substantial book. I love that you have a depiction of the card, and then it talks about the card's meaning and possible interpretations, and then it gives a little bit of information about whatever Ascended Master, a little bit of their history. This is the back of the deck. You know, she's very angel heavy, which I don't mind because I work with angels. But so, you know, here's the Green Man, and there's Pan, and we've got Buddha and Lu and Merlin, and there's Hina and Hilarion here, and Kuthumi and Saint Germain, and there's Lakshmi, Mother Mary, Kuan Yin. There is a ton of different ascended masters, gods and goddesses, great spiritual teachers, and I call them master teachers in this deck. And the way that I love to work with this deck is I will sit down and get in a space and I will say what Ascended Master wants to work with me at this time and pull a card. And then afterward, I will either pull again from this deck or from another deck to ask what it is that we're going to be working on. I really love this deck. It is my favorite Doreen Virtue deck. And then I have this Archangel Michael deck, which is another one that can go by the wayside. I have given away decks before, and this is one that I need to. I love working with angels. This is a really good book. They have little prayers at the end. It's kind of annoying, but I just always take it as a sort of affirmation, almost. At any rate, here's the back. And I just hate the imagery. I hate the way it's laid out, the prayer on the card. I hate the whole thing. Oh, hate is a strong word, but I really dislike. I love this card though. Look how pretty that is. But for the most part, I'm not attracted to the imagery. It's all disjointed, different kinds of imagery. This kind of things that she does in her decks drives me crazy. I've just never really enjoyed working with these cards. So they're probably a deck that I will end up passing on to someone at some point. The last Doreen Virtue deck I have here is the Goddess Oracle, which I really enjoy. Again, a nice, pretty thick book. And also, you know, what the card means, and then a bit about who is depicted on the card. I like that. I mean, my path is not goddess-centric at all, but I mean, I'm a woman and I work with goddesses, so yeah, I'm drawn to goddess decks. So even though this is a Doreen Virtue deck, which again, it has nothing to do with her personally, it's just the way they're styled. Stylistically, I'm not crazy about Doreen Virtue decks, but I do like this one. And yeah. Oh, and this of course is what the back of the cards look like. Next are my Stephen Farmer cards, and he is the ex-husband of Doreen Virtue, actually. Most of you may be familiar with this Earth Magic deck. Here's what the back looks like. It's a very substantial book, very big. And these cards I find very beautiful. Of course, they're super easy to work with. Most oracles are. And there is a continuity problem with the artwork as far, you know, it's just not all, there's not a general theme with the artwork, but it doesn't bother me as much in this deck for some reason. Oh, I love that card. Look at that. I love this deck. I really do. I read with it regularly. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this deck. Sorry guys, I know I'm going fast, but like I said, I don't want this video to take forever. And then messages from your animal spirit guides. This is one of my early decks as well. Again, he does really good, substantial books. These cards, this is the back of course, they are not, they're not sealed or coated at all. They're just raw, rough, really good, thick cardstock, and I love that about them. And of course, they have animals on them. So shark, trust your instincts to discern the truth of the situation. And The art style is this sort of platypus. Stop complaining and focus on your attention on the blessings you have. The artwork is this sort of watercolor style, which I love. And of course, it's complete continuity because the whole deck is done that way. Meerkat. Get support from a trusted group of like-minded friends. It's just, I don't know. I just love this deck. I've worked very extensively with this deck, although I haven't in quite some time. Beautiful deck. Next is The Enchanted Map by Colette Baron-Reid. And again, something I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and this is probably the thickest book I've ever had with an Oracle deck. Here is the back. These cards are also very beautiful. Love them. They're so sort of surreal. There's a fantasy, dream-like quality about them. And I just think that they're lovely. I'm not normally into this kind of style where you're mixing the real with the surreal, you know, real life things with sort of animated or computer generated images. I don't normally like that in a deck, but it doesn't bother me at all in this deck. I just did a reading for my husband and myself on Samhain with these cards, actually. Look at that. Lovely. Slow and Steady. Here is the Easy Astrology Oracle Cards. Unlock Your Inner Guide by Maya White. This is a weird deck. I've had this deck for a very long time. I have notes in this deck, guys. Notes. And not even all the notes I need. Okay, so the backs of the cards are all different. Because they're kind of double-sided cards when you work with them. It's a really, really big book as well. There's different spreads and everything in here. This deck is more complicated. I have a pretty tentative relationship with astrology, but a dear friend of mine I would call her an expert, although I know she wouldn't necessarily use that term for herself, because astrology is really something that you can study your whole life and never really be all-knowing. But she's taught me quite a bit. So I would say that I have a little bit better of a grasp of it than your average everyday person who doesn't really look at it. Even still, I'm clueless when it comes to astrology. And part of the reason I bought this deck was in the hope that I would get better at astrology. But so, you know, in astrology, you have the houses. So house 1 is the house of life, personal action, rebirth, expression, personality, appearance, first impression, new beginnings. So all the houses are represented in this way. And then you have the planets. So the sun has its associate, corresponds to Leo in the 5th house. Ego, will, heart, success, individuality, illumination. And so all of the planets are represented. You have Chiron, and it corresponds to mutable signs: shaman, mentor, maverick, wholeness, shapeshifter, wounded healer. And I mean, okay, so in here are the zodiac signs. Aquarius, I know the dates that it's from. It's a fixed air sign, and it's the associations are catalyst, reformer, innovator, individuality, knowledge, humanity, and it has the gem and even the planetary association. So all of those are here. And then you have the North Node, and so the North Node is about integration of new experiences and points to where growth is needed. In the future, you cultivate by reaching out, an opposite of the South Node. Okay, and then there's the South Node, and then the parts of fortune, and Mercury in retrograde. Mercury in retrograde is apparent backward motion. Lasts approximately 3 weeks and happens 3 times a year. It corresponds to delays and miscommunications. Okay, you do readings with these cards. I don't even have to tell you how complicated that is. So they're not a deck, even though I've had this deck for at least 8 years, if not longer, I haven't worked with it overly much, and I should. I need to set it somewhere where I have to look at it all the time, because otherwise it's out of sight, out of mind, and I don't think about it. But I really want to get into this deck. I think it's a really interesting deck, and I'm kind of ashamed of myself that I haven't done better. Last but certainly not least are Drew's decks. This is 3 decks that I have created myself. I'll start with my least favorite. Now what I did was I sat down and I wrote down a long list of cards that I would incorporate into a deck, and it turned out it was actually 3 decks worth. I don't even know how many cards are in each deck, but you can see there's quite a few. I'd say there's at least 30, maybe more. I just took images off the internet and ran them through filters and made cards. And they're kind of big, but I like them. They're pretty substantial because there are 2 pieces of cardstock, and then they're laminated with thick laminate as well. This one is Intention and Find Your Gratitude, Compass, Determination. This is Slow and Steady, Isolation, the Shaman, Inner Guidance, Sanctuary, Forgiveness. And with my decks, there is no guidebook. There's no set interpretation because they are meant to be used for intuitive readings, because that's how I like to read. This is called Day to Day. And here we have Compassion and Grounding, Guardian Angel, Study, Flexibility, Cut Cords, Smudge, Change of Fortune, Step by Step, Follow the Breadcrumbs, Balance, Bounty, The Fae, and lastly, my favorite is The Middle Road. And you've got Follow Your Heart, Back to Basics, Community, Dreams, Energy Work, Growth, Unconditional Love, Catharsis, Seek Guidance, and so on and so forth. So just kind of a little fun thing I did. It's kind of nice to have decks of your own that you made. I don't use them more so than any of my other decks though. Basically that's it. Hopefully it didn't run too long. Those are my decks. So thanks for listening, and until next time, much love and gratitude.